Okay, so let's see the practical application we are going to develop now.
Well, so that we will be able we have a simple calculator, and we are able to add, subtract, multiply, and divide and clear, right?
Okay, so let's continue to develop this application now.
Hi everyone. The lesson is Simple Calculator App Part 2 Event Handling under Android. So this is the continuation of this lesson into Part 2. So you have to make sure that you look at Part 1 before this. We'll be using these tools during this lecture and these reference materials. Make sure, as we said earlier, make sure to look at this previous lesson. You can find the link to this lesson in the description. In this app, we'll be adding the event handling for the previous app developed, right? And we'll be working on programming the button click. As usual, it's going to be practical demonstrations. So this is the project we have done in the previous lesson. So we have done up to this point. We have designed the interface, we have talked about the constraints, but what is missing here is when we add the numbers, still these buttons are not working, right? So now we have to work on this. We call it as event handling, right? So to start with event handling, the first thing I had to do is whenever we click these buttons, say plus button, we need to get the text from this first text box. Then we need to get the text from the second text box, which means we need to refer to these text boxes. So in order to refer to the text boxes, let's go to the design now, because we have finished the constraint, so we don't have to stay in the blueprint. We can just go to the design, which looks little like the final version. So let's click on the text box. Then you can see the ID, right? So I'm going to delete the existing ID, and I'm going to give something meaningful, like say txt1, or let's say t1, right? Let's call it as or we can call it as txt number 1, right? A meaningful name. So when I give this name and press the enter key, what happens is it's asking to update the references for this. Let's say yes, right? And say yes. And also you can have a look at the XML file related to this interface. Over here, look at the code. You can see that text box, right? So the text boxes, okay, one thing, once again I'm going to the design. The labels, there are few things. There are labels, then there are text boxes, right? So the labels are text views in the XML, and the text boxes are edit text. So keep that in mind. The labels are text views, text boxes are edit text. See, now when I gave that ID, it has updated the ID of the first text box as txt number 1, but the remaining text boxes are still having the default names. So I'm going to change them. I don't want this default name. I want this to be called as, if this is txt number 1, I want this to be called as txt number 2. Then I want this to be called as txt number 3. So I'm going to the design, click on the second text box, go to the ID property, delete the existing one, and call it as say txt number 2, right? Change all the references. Click the third text box, select ID, put it as say txt answer, right? So now I got some meaningful names, right? Txt answer, awesome, great. So now when I click the from the plus button, I can refer this as txt number 1, this as txt number 2, and this as txt ans. So to write the code for the plus button, what you do is you click on the plus button, right? And then you go to the property palette, and on the on click property, you can tell what the method you want to execute. Let's say the method is add. Say I want to add numbers, so let's call that as the add method, right? Okay, so on click add. Now the what I have to do next is I have to go to the Java file and declare that add method, right? So go to the main activity Java file, and over here inside this class I have to declare the add method. So there's a standard syntax you have to follow when you are declaring this method. So to get that standard syntax, what you have to do is you have to Google search for Android button click, and then you will get references. So this second reference, it talks about buttons. See, okay, it talks about let's say responding to click event. So it says the event is Android on click. So well, what happened earlier was when you were in the layout and when you click on the button and said on click add, what happened is when if you look at the XML code, you can see for that button, right? For that button, the on click event, let's look into the button. So for the button, see, it has automatically updated the XML for the on click as add. So which means when the button is clicked, it will be invoking the add method. You don't have to touch the XML. When you did it over here, it happened. So now you have to go and declare the add method. So how you declare the add method? It's a standard. So when you did do the referencing, you will see it says how to write this mess. In this example, when you click, it's calling send message method. So this is send message. So this is the uh, this is the standard signature to declare the method in Java, right? So I will be copying it from here and putting it inside the class. Now our method is not send message. In my case, it's add, right? The method is add, and this is a standard parameter, the view. So what is missing here is the import statement is missing. So what you do is you press with the control key, right? You click on this with say control key, the mouse, right? So while pressing the control key, if you press the mouse, or if not, while pressing the control, if you hold on, so while press, let me show it to you. So the option here is, let me show it to you. So two options. One thing is press the control key and press the mouse, then you'll get the bulb. From here you can say import the class. The other option is just click here, right, and press Alt and enter. So Alt key from the keyboard and the enter, Alt enter at the same time. So then it also imports the package, right? Either way, now you got the method, right? So as the first thing I will do is put a system.out.state and see whether say add, let's say plus button clicked, right? Plus. So let's see whether this works, right? So if everything is fine, this should work and the message should come when I click the plus button, right? So let's click the plus button. So every time I click the plus, I should see the message in the terminal. So let's click the terminal under run, right? Under run, just the run. As you can see, every time I click the button, see look at the run terminal, it prints the message. So which means the button click is working, right? So now you know that it's working. So now I need to access the text boxes, right? From the add method, what I had to do is I had to access the text box 1 and the text box 2 and then add it, right? So to add the text, to refer to the text boxes, there's a method you have to use called find view by ID. So the find view by ID method is getting inherited from the parent class app compact activity. So to find view by ID method, you have to give the ID of the text box. That is why we gave the ID, right? But there's a standard way of referring it. To refer the ID, you have to put, you have to say r dot id dot, then the ID we gave a little while ago was txt number 1. So you have to refer it using this syntax, right? Then find view by ID will return that component. So in this case, txt number 1, what is it? Once again, if you look at this, if you click here, if you click over here, let's increase a little bit. So txt number 1, if you go to the XML, you can see that it is a edit text. See, txt number 1 is of type edit text, which means it, so it's over. Also in the property palette, look at my mouse top right hand side, you can see it's a edit text. If you click on a button, it says it's a button. If you click on a label, it says it's a, hold on, if you click on a label, it's a text view. So now you know, in Android, a text box is known as edit text. So when you search for it, it returns a edit text. So you have to store it in a edit text, right? In a edit text object. That is the theory, right? So on edit text object, let's say T1, for example, I'm just giving you example T1. Now if you do it inside this method, okay, let's do it this way and let's commit this. So edit text T1, same. Now I can say r.id.txt number 2, let's say T2, right, just for example. Then you access the third text box as well, because you need to display the result in that answer. So let's call it as T3, for example. Now from the T1, the text box, you need to get the text in order to add the numbers. But as you can see, when you call the getText method, it returns a editable object. It's not returning a string. So because of that, when you call getText, you are not getting a string, so you can't store it in a string. So if I say string s1, I can't, because the getText is not returning a string. So what I have to do is I have to convert this into a string by calling the toString method. Now you can see the toString method returns a string. So keep that in mind. So this is how you retrieve the data coming from the text boxes, right? So t2.getText, let's call this as s2. Awesome. Now you need to use your Java knowledge and convert the strings into numbers. So let's say number 1, for example. So to convert a string into a number in Java, you have to call the integer class. There's a static method called parseInt. Then you have to pass the string s1 as a parameter, and then it returns the integer, as you can see here, right? So then you pass s1, and because it returns the integer, you put it into a integer over here, right? Awesome. Same you do for s2, right? And you put it into an integer called number 2, and then you can get the answer integer as number 1 plus number 2. Now once again, okay, now you got the answer. Now you need to display this answer in the third text box, meaning on T3. So if you try to say T3 dot set text, so on the T3, the edit text object, there's a method called set text, right? But the set text requires a string. So what you have to do is you have to convert this answer into a string, which means, let me create a string s3, and the integer answer, in order to convert it into a string, there's a method called string.valueOf. So on the string class, there's a static method called valueOf, where you can pass an integer, which in this case the answer, and the valueOf method returns a string. So now you got the string answer. So now to the text box T3, in other words to edit text T3, you can say set text, and then you can pass the string s3. So this is how you add numbers. So let's run this and it should work. Let's see how it goes. First let's put a number, say 10, and let's put 2 here, right? And let's click the subtract button. Will not work because we didn't write. Clear will not work, but the plus should work. So if I click plus, see, it works. Awesome. So now you are clear. So what we did was, once again, on the add method, you have got access to the text boxes, but you have to convert them into strings because it gives edit text. Then strings you converted to numbers, added them, and once again you converted the integer result into a string, and then you were able to put it. Great, awesome. So now the same thing has to be done for the other buttons, right? So what you do is you will go to the XML, you click on the subtract button, and then the on click method, let's call it as sub, right? The sub method. Once again, you have to declare the sub method on the Java file. So you have to go to the activity file like you did, right? To this add method, you just copy the same thing, but make sure you copy and put it inside the class, right? So the class just here, right? Inside the class, right? Then make sure you put the curly bracket. Then you call this as sub method, right? Same, we'll quickly do it for the rest of the button. So let's call this as the on click mul method multiply. Let's click this as the on click method. Let's call it as divide. Clear button, let's call the on click method as clear, right? So now you know the methods. So you go to the Java file, and what you do is you just copy this, paste, paste, paste. So then you just give these names as multiply, what the names whatever you gave earlier, right, on the XML, on the interface, and then clear. Awesome. So now the subtract method also requires the T1, T2 and T3. So what I can do is I can, once again I will have to put this stuff, right, inside this, but then it's duplication of code, because I have to again put the same stuff, find view by ID, inside the multiply, also inside divide, also inside clear. So if I, for example, if I just copy it from here and put it here, right, and then start writing the subtract code, it's duplication of code once again in the multiply as well. So rather than putting it in each method, what I would what we can do is you can declare them as global variables. So edit text t1 inside the class as attributes like this over here. Say edit text t1, right? Then edit text t2, right? This is the trick. T2 and edit text T3. And then what you do is you remove these three lines from here, you cut it, and you will be putting it inside on create, right? So you'll be talk in the next lesson we will talk about what is this on create, and it's coming under the life cycle methods, life cycle, right? But on create you just put it, then you don't declare again, you just assign them into the global variable. In other words, you then assign them into the attributes. So now not only that, even the three strings, right, or the two strings, because you need them continuously. So if you want, you can even declare them as global variables, but I will keep it simple at this level. So now you understand, um, well, of course, even the two strings, right? So because then I can just keep it keep all, as global variables. A string s1, for example, in that case I really don't need even to declare the edit text 1 2 3 as global variables, edit text t1 t2 t3, but doesn't matter, these are just programming tricks. So now even accessing this data, right, I can move it and put it into the on create, because on create method executes when the when the activity is getting created. So when the activity is getting created, I can read the data. No, now it's now this thing won't work, right? Because if you try to do it here, when the activity is getting created, there's no data in the text boxes, right? So if you say t1.get text here, it won't work, right? So you have to wait till a button is clicked in order to get the text, so that the user has entered the data. So this part will have to go back to this location, right? Because on create you can access the text boxes and keep the references, right? But you have to wait till the user enter the data and click the button in order to get the data. So because of that, the get text should stay here. Awesome, right? So think about it, what I said, listen to it couple of times, then you will understand. Okay, so you got the stuff right over here. So now this should work, right? So what I have to do now is just copy this part, right? copy this part and just bring it to the subtract method, right? And same concept, but instead of adding, you subtract. Once again, you bring the same thing to the multiply method, but instead of adding, you will be multiplying. You bring it to the divide method as well. You paste the code, but here instead of adding, you will be dividing, right? Awesome. So let's run this now, and this should work. So you are learning a lot of things, right? So let's put 10 and 2, right? And now let's click plus, see it works. Subtract, see it works. Multiply, it works. Divide, it works. Clear method, same concept, right? So on clear method, I can access T1, T2 and T3 because now they are attributes, T1, T2, T3. They are global. So on the clear method, I can say T1 dot set text, right? Null. Null means empty in Java. So which means the text boxes will be empty, right? So remember, null means nothing, empty. So this should work, this should do the trick, right? So let's run this, and let's say if I got 100 and let's say 20, right? Let's say subtract 80, now clear. Awesome, see it clears, right? So the clear method works. There's one more final thing, right? So when you click the clear button, you would allow the cursor to move into the first text box, right? So that user can enter the data. So in order to do that, if you look at API, right, you will see there's a method. So on the text box T1, there's a method called request focus. So request focus means you are asking you're asking the cursor to move into the text box T1, right? So let me put a comment and say move the cursor into the T1 text box, right? So that's the trick. So let's run this once again, and if you click the run button, now let's say 100, let's put 40 here, right? And let's say multiply and clear. You see the cursor has moved, right? So awesome viewers. So you all learn something really important for you to develop mobile apps, and we will be taking this knowledge forward, right? Let's see what's next. Okay, you successfully completed the practical demonstrations and you learn about event handling, button click. You can find the link to download the source code. Look at the description section for that. Once again, the developer docs and APIs will be referred in the next lesson, right? So have a look at the next lesson to complete this app. In the next lesson, we will be discussing about the API technical aspects of this app, and making things more clear to you, right? So don't miss the next lesson. Have a look at our other videos as well, and we are very excited to see you in the next lesson, right? See you in the next lesson.